What is up, all you individuals out there? It's me, full-time anime man, and I am here with part 13 of What If Deku Was a Firewolf. Yep, I got nothing to say. Let's go ahead and get into this. Hope y'all enjoy. I just remember what I wanted to say. I'm about to be loud in this video. Where I'm about to be the loudest is on this timeline. So, go ahead and turn down your volume now. Enjoy!
Where we last left off, Izuku had lost control when he engaged combat to save his brothers Bakugo and Shoto. But when he looked at the full moon and changed into the beast, he was snapped out of it when Aizawa canceled his quirk and came to a shocking realization. The realization that he had killed his animal friend that he had saved when he was just a cub, Kachan the bear. We pick up 2 weeks after the incident. Izuku curled up in his bed in sadness and denial, so much disbelief that he can't accept the fact that he had killed his friend who was basically still an animal cub. The image of his normal hand in the claw path of the scratch mark that he left on Kachan the bear's skin is burned into his mind. Over the past 2 weeks, his friends have been texting him things like, "What's going on with me?" and "What did you do to me? My strength, I'm so strong." That was from Kirishima. Bakugo, Shoto, Ida, Uraraka, Yaoyorozu have been visiting him in his room trying to cheer him up, but their attempts never got him to move from that spot in his bed. Like, he was a statue. They even tried to get him to at least eat. He hasn't eaten or slept in days after the incident. The word got out that Izuku was the beast that critically injured Stain and put him on life support for the rest of his life. And in that progress, UA has suffered some repercussions from this. The public would ask the UA faculty, why is it that a monster like him is attending UA? And they would also say things like he should be in jail or in a zoo. Aizawa, who was wearing a suit and had his hair in a ponytail, was furious about what the people were saying about Izuku. He would then slam his fist on the table and he would stand up. And he would say he tried to turn himself into the police, but they didn't believe him, and that UA is a place where students go to better and understand and control their powers. Yes, the young boy doesn't fully grasp his powers yet, but he is on his way. He's working hard. We want our students to better themselves and to become great heroes. I believe in Izuku Midoriya. Why don't you? The crowd would be silent for a second, but some people would still object to UA allowing Izuku to go to their facility. Izuku continues as he sat there in his bed with that image burned in his mind as he pondered away, when his mother entered his dark room with food on a tray. She looks and sees Izuku in a ball on his bed. Taking in a deep breath, she walks in. "Son, how are you doing?" He doesn't say anything. "Honey, come on. You need to eat. You haven't eaten or drinking in days. It pains me so much to see you like this." He remained silent. Look, son, you have to understand that what you did can't be undone. You have to look forward, son. You can never look back. I know it hurts. You you took an innocent animal's life. Are you willing to atone for it? To do more good so that it could outweigh the bad? Will you please move on, son? Stop starving yourself. Because I can't stand seeing you like this. She then embraces Izuku. Please, just stop. Sadly, nothing. Inko spent hours crying while hugging her son, and when she had finished, she said, "It'll be okay, son. I'm gonna go get you a doctor. Maybe they can help you more than I can." Inko then slowly walks towards the door and looks back and says, "Please get better." She slowly closes the door and Izuku is left alone once again. But then he felt the same feeling when there was a full moon out. In his mind, Izuku has not even been thinking about why there has been a full moon for the past 2 weeks. He was just sitting there, pondering away. Looking back on that night, a small flashback ensues. Uraraka told him that after he changed, he fought the League of Villains, but in the process he killed Mr. Compress and ripped Spinner's arm off and critically injured the most manliest woman in an anime. The rest of the classmates came in and saw the Wolfman and tried to fight him, but because they didn't know who he was, they considered him a threat. Werewolf Izuku then scratched all of them, giving them lycanthropy. That's just another word for werewolfism. And Kachan, the bear, had no idea that Werewolf Izuku was Izuku, and they would start fighting. The beast was more stronger than Kachan was. That's when Aizawa came in, as Izuku was about to deliver the final blow, but before Aizawa could stop him, he was too late. Izuku slashed down his claws at the bear's throat, but as his claws went in, his fingers turned back to normal, revealing the path of his fingers. The flashback ends. Izuku then said, in a very depressed tone, "It's your fault." Izuku's wolf then walks out from his body. I'm sorry, Izuku. I wish I had never found you. My life was going just fine without you, and now he's dead. The wolf's ears then drooped down to show signs of sadness. Izuku then said, "Go away. And this time, don't come back." The wolf then turns around and he walks through the walls like a phantom, out of Izuku's sight. From outside his room, Izuku heard the front door shut, but then the sound followed with a loud thud noise. He'd had thought that his mom probably just dropped something after she stepped out, and he continued to sit there. He looks over to his desk and he saw an unopened letter that Shoto left. "Here, it's from that kid you helped save from the camp. He wrote you this." After a few minutes of thinking, Izuku finally gets out of his bed, walks towards his desk, and he opens the letter. It reads, Izuku Midoriya, thank you for saving me and avenging my parents. I know it wasn't intentional. We all knew his reign of terror was never going to end, and he was a man too far gone to care about anything. I do hope that you get better soon, and you can show me your werewolf once you get used to it. You looked pretty cool. Signed, Coda. A small smile comes across Izuku's face, and then suddenly, without even touching the TV remote, Izuku's TV powered on. It revealed the news feed showing downtown on fire of blue flames. Wait a minute. Are those Dobby's flames? Asked Izuku. The news reporter says that all the fire department and fire heroes have disappeared. Well, not fire heroes, the water heroes have disappeared. Izuku looked outside his window and saw downtown city on fire. Oh no, I have to do something, said Izuku. Izuku then rushed out his door and to the exit. He ran as fast as he could to downtown. When he reached it, he couldn't help but notice that all the buildings were already empty, and so were the streets. He thought to himself, well, that's no problem. Maybe all the people already managed to evacuate before things could really get out of hand. Right now, I need to absorb all this flame. And so he does. Spreading his legs and his arms out, Izuku then calls the fire to him, and the fire around him covers his surrounding, forming a tornado. It slowly started to absorb in Izuku's body, revealing his surroundings, and what he saw next made him realize it was all a trap. For he was surrounded by leagues of villain scum. All had their eyes fixed on Izuku. There was a few Nomus and a few goons from the USJ that managed to escape. Izuku looked around. They all had their quirks drawn and ready if Izuku had done anything. From what he saw, it looked like there was at least like hundreds, maybe even thousands of them. From the distance, villains were moving out of the way of their boss that was walking towards them, revealing All for One and Shigaraki holding Inko Midoriya, Izuku's mother, hostage, 4 fingers on her, with his thumb in the air. Mom? Izuku? Izuku then growls, yelling, "Let her go, you bastards!" Izuku was struck from the back, making him fall to his knees. All for One then approached Izuku, saying, now, Izuku, everything's going to be okay. Izuku says, this coming from a guy who brought an army and burned down some of these buildings? Well, you got me there. Anyway, I just wanted to make a deal with you. Make that 2 deals, just in case the first one doesn't work out. First, I would like you to join the League of Villains. If you do as I say, I promise that you and your mother will be well taken care of. All I need you to do is just a few things, this and that, and everything will work out greatly for the both of you. Izuku immediately responded with, hell no! Ever since I started school, and you and your stupid leagues have been doing nothing but trying to kill me and my friends. That includes a little boy. You create monsters that were once humans that you turn into mindless zombies. Why would I want to join a bunch of like you? Give me one reason, just one. Why should I join you? Because as far as I've seen, you've all done nothing but destroy this society. You hurt people that just want to live honorable lives. You go after kids and you destroy everything in your path. A moment of silence goes by, and All for One finally speaks. Well, this is why there was the other choice for you. But first, I would like to explain to you why you should join us. The reason why you should join us is because I could offer you more power. I'm sure you've noticed that the full moon has been up for the past, what, 3 weeks, I believe? I'm the one who makes the full moon. You see, I have a variety of quirks, and one of them is light manipulation. For these past few days, I have been bending the light of the sun to form a full moon. I did it for you, Izuku, because after a spy watched you at your camp, you were afraid of your own power. And so, I did it so that you wouldn't be so scared of it, that it's a part of you, that you just need to learn to embrace it, so that you wouldn't be scared of it. Izuku was bewildered, so all the stuff that had happened, it was all because of All for One. He comes to that realization. He stares intensely at him, and All for One says, "But since you won't join us, which I totally respect, here's your second choice. Your second choice is that you will give me both of your quirks, your fire quirk and your wolf quirk, and you and your mother can walk free from here." Izuku's eyes widened. He looked at his mother and she said, "Izuku, no, don't give it to him. That's not his quirk, it's yours." Shigaraki then punched Inko on the side of her head. That pissed Izuku off. Izuku then got up from his knees and he started speed walking towards Izuku, saying, "Shigaraki, don't you touch my mother, you bastard!" Ah! Fire started emanating off of Izuku, but then he was struck from the back. All the villains started attacking him, punching him, and kicking him while he was on the ground. Inko screamed at them, begging them to stop hurting her baby. They finally stopped, but Izuku's face was bloody and beaten. But then, right before their eyes, thankfully there was a full moon out, he started healing in front of everybody. The bumps on his head then disappeared, and the wound marks on his face vanished. And unfortunately, All for One really wanted his quirk now. He says, "What a tremendous trick you got up your sleeve there. You know, Izuku, just think about it. If you give me your quirk, you won't have to worry about changing every night anymore. I will bear that burden for you, and you can live a normal life from now on. Also, you won't have to worry about killing any more people, losing control and killing people like Muscular, Mr. Compress, that bear." Izuku, who was looking down at the ground the whole time, was on his knees. He then looked up at All for One, who had his hand extended out towards him, wanting Izuku to shake it. But then Izuku just spit his blood at the mask of this bastard and said, "Piss off." All for One wiped the blood off of his mask and said, "I'm going to ask you one final time." He was cut off. He was interrupted by Shigaraki grunting and stomping his feet while saying, "Oh, oh, you know what? I'm getting tired of this." "Shigaraki, calm down." "No, I will not calm down. This green-haired cheater has been nothing but trouble to us, and you want to keep showing him sympathy? Well, guess what? I'm going to start running things from now on. This fraud should have his entire world shattered in front of him. And I think we should start with her." He gestures to Inko. All for One says, "Shigaraki, don't." Izuku then jumped up to his feet and said, "Shigaraki, I swear to God, if you hurt my mother any further, everybody here will die. Do you understand me?" "Really? Let's see how that turns out. Shigaraki then reaches upward with his hand extended outwards to touch Inko. Izuku ran in to stop him, but he wasn't quick enough. Shigaraki then touched the center of Inko's stomach, and immediately she already started to crack and decay. Izuku then landed a punch on Shigaraki so hard that he flew far, far away. Izuku quickly picked up his mother and then rested her on his lap. Little by little, she started crackling and decaying away. Izuku cries to the sky, "No! No! 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 Mom, please, please, just hang in there. I'll get you help. I just, I." Suddenly, Izuku was met with a soft, gentle touch on the side of his face. He looks and sees his mom touching him. Inko then said, "Psych." Before then, before she then changed her shape into Himeki Toga, and Izuku's eyes widened, with her body turning into a puddle-like substance on his lap. Everyone was confused, including All For One. He looked at Twice, and Twice said, "Hey, I didn't copy her. I swear to God, I didn't. Now, the only person that I copied recently was Toga," and he paused. "Oh, Toga." They looked back at Izuku. He was shaking with anger. For all he saw, he pretty much just saw his mom die in his arms. He was so confused and so angry. He slowly gets up and tightly clenches his fist. Duly noted, I forgot to mention this, it was cloudy that night, so he didn't look at the full moon. Blood began to spill from his fist. When he let go, he revealed his fingers had turned into claws. He takes a step forward towards All For One. "You bastards." Immense amount of heat started emanating off of Izuku. His legs then started stretching, his muscles then started to grow and expand. What's this? Izuku changing without looking at the full moon? But how, I'm sure you're all wondering. Well, you see, Izuku is actually forcing the beast out because he needs to change. He has to change. But something about this transformation feels different. Izuku actually feels aware of it, like he knows he's changing. And yet he felt in control of himself. His eyes were fixed on taking down every villain, including Shigaraki. He didn't care if he accidentally offed somebody, he didn't care who got in his way. And with his last words escaping his lips, he said, "You bastard!" Izuku's face then stretched out to his transformation completion. He then lets out a loud roar, and when he was done, all of the villains stared at him, scared. Without even warning, Izuku then lunged himself at one of the villains, ripping him apart. And then moving on to the next villain that was closer to him, taking him out with one hit. Izuku would not hold back. If he had ended up offing someone, he didn't care. He wanted all of them to die. And so, using the pack howl, he called in as many allies as they could, but this was different. They were all shaped like him in his werewolf form. And they would all start attacking the villains, taking them out. At one point, the villains tried to attack Izuku directly at the same time, but that only made things worse for them. For what happened next, Werewolf Izuku then piled up as much as his flames as possible to his chest, and when he reached the maximum point, he then reached both of his arms out, and a bubble that glowed the color red and yellow formed around him and the villains that were caught in the blast radius. Izuku would roar, and the air around them would grow hotter and hotter until the villains then burned to ashes. Izuku stopped, but there were still many villains to take care of. And so, gathering all his strength, he then called his clones back to him. And then he grew in size as his body started emanating this aura light of orange and red, just like the wolf you see on your screen. Izuku Izuku began to pick up villains with his teeth, biting deeply into them and like crushing them with his teeth and swinging them left to right like a chew toy. Giant Izuku would then grind his body to the ground and burning badly any villains that he came in contact with. He then began to stamp downwards with his two front legs, jumping upwards and then using all the force to bring it downwards. All for one watched in amazement when Izuku started his fit of rage. He quickly retrieved Shigaraki, who passed out, and laid him on the rooftop. I can't believe he has so much power. I must have it for myself. In Izuku's fight, he was thinking to himself, Wolfie, I'm sorry. Please come back to me. Izuku then heard, I never left. I was always here. While Izuku continues his fight, he says, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have blamed you for what happened. If I had simply told Kachan and everyone else that I'd turned into a werewolf when there was a full moon, this wouldn't have happened. Yeah, let's just say it's easier to blame someone else than take responsibility. It's fine, Izuku. I understand you were just grieving. But now, it's time to finish what we started. I'm way ahead of you. But you do understand that tonight could be our last night alive, right? Well, let's take as much of these villains as we can with us. In reality, Giant Izuku's body let off a sort of man. There's a gnat in here. Let off a sort of explosion that flexes out both of he flexes out both of his arms and his legs, and he gives out a roar as his body gave off as the light on his body started to expand outwards like a radio signal. The villains flew backwards. This goes on for a few minutes. Izuku was proceedingly getting more and more tired. The last remaining villains saw their opportunity. They would strike Izuku with a lamppost and hit him while throwing sharp objects that popped out from one guy's wrist, and he would throw another one and another. Izuku would be impaled by some of these spikes, and he would be able to shake him out, and his healing factor would kick in and heal it. But this would catch his attention, and this would really piss him off. And he would actually chase after the villain that was throwing them. He would run, but while he was distracted, the villains readied their chains. While Izuku was chasing after the dagger thrower, he would corner himself in an alley. This alley was too small for Izuku to fit in. So he took in a deep breath, and he blew fire into the alleyway. The man that saw the flames coming thought about jumping into the dumpster to hide from the flames, but unfortunately, he was too late. The flames then came in contact with him, and he burned to ashes. The villains then distracted to follow them. The villains then the villains then distracted Izuku to follow them. He does, but he falls into a trap. First, they wrap the chains around his snout. What? Wait, they wrap the chains around his neck. Izuku's. Oh my God! Try again. First, they would wrap the chain around Izuku's neck. It took nearly half of what was left of the villains to even like get him to like put into the right place. He was going to breathe fire again, but his snout was wrapped by more chains. Izuku then tried. Izuku was tied down to the concrete ground thanks to the chains. He kept trying to fight back, but one of the villains then opened a fire hydrant and redirected the water at Izuku, forcing him to shrink back down. And Werewolf Izuku was back to normal size Werewolf Izuku. Even when small, he kept trying to fight, but the villains got the best of him. Oh yeah, and I also forgot to mention this. The reason why there are no heroes right now is because the League of Villains made enough to distract them while they dealt with Izuku. So it's going to be a minute until the real heroes show up. Werewolf Izuku laid there on the ground, tired of all tired. Excuse me. All for One then approached Izuku and said, "That was beautiful. So much display of power. There's no doubt I'm going to put all that to good use. And I'll let my associates here figure out what they're going to do with you. Sorry, it's completely out of my hands. But it has been fun, Izuku. But I'm going to take your quirk now." All for One then reached his hand towards Izuku to take his quirk. Izuku looked at All for One's hand and saw what appeared to be black lightning with red outlining it. And Izuku thought to himself, "Well, this is it. Mom." He then closes his eyes. "Mom, please find me in the afterlife." He closes his eyes and accepts his fate, but then a loud boom can be heard from a few feet away. They all look up to see where it came from, and they saw Yaoyorozu with a cannon aimed at them on top of a roof. "Who is that?" asked All for One. Izuku smiles and says, "That's my girl." She fired another cannonball, and it hit a large group of villains down below. She then yelled, "Now!" and everyone from 1A leaped out in action and fought villains and got to Izuku, forcing the villains backwards. Though All for One did not back down, Yaoyorozu then shot a cannonball at him that made him back away from Izuku. Even Bakugo and Shoto showed up, who, may I mention, did not get scratched by Izuku, so they do not have werewolfism. They get the chains off of Izuku, and Shoto refuels him with fire. "Izuku, are you alright?" asked Bakugo. Werewolf Izuku would say, "Yeah, I'm fine, guys, thanks." "Wait," said Shoto. "You're talking. Are you in control now?" Izuku looks down to his hands and he says, "Yeah, I'm actually in control now. And I didn't even have to look. It's just the fact that when they killed my mom, it just came out. I'm not sure how, but I'm in control. And I actually feel good." I actually like this. He then snaps back to reality and says, "Anyway, I need your guys' help to take down these villains." Izuku looks towards One for All, who was running away, and he says, "I'm going to go after their boss." So, can I count on you guys to help take down these villains? Bakugo and Shoto nodded their heads, saying, "Yeah." Izuku says, "Okay, but first." He then looked towards everybody and his classmates and said, "Listen here, everyone. If you're going to take these villains, I'm going to have to rank you up to private first class like Ida." Izuku then lets out a howl, and everyone in his class shapeshifts into their own wolf forms, all except for Bakugo and Shoto, of course. Izuku then yelled over to Ida, telling him to teach everyone how to conjure packs to assist them. He would then nod his head, and Izuku would chase after All for One. They would both stop in an open area. "All for One, I will take you down," said Izuku. All for One maniacally laughed, turning his attention to the young wolf boy and said, "I take it Toshinori never told you what I'm capable of. Well, let me show you what I can do." He then raised his right he then he then raised his right index finger and thumb in a gun position. He then jolted it upwards while saying "bang," as if he fired an actual gun. Suddenly, Izuku was met with an unexcruciating pain on his lower body. He looked and saw what appeared to be a bullet hole with blood oozing out from his torso. Izuku would hold the wound with both of his paws, and he would fall to his knees from the pain. All for One continues to laugh. "Where in your right mind did you think that you could take me in a fight? I am the most powerful being on Earth." He starts walking towards Izuku. "How could you defeat me? You're just a child who thinks that he could do anything if he's got the strongest quirk. Well, guess what? You're not the strongest. Just an ignorant little pipsqueak. A dog. A little match whose only reason for existence is to burn humanity so." While all this was going on, Izuku had a flashback to that day he witnessed an animal get shot. That elk. The sound of the rifle firing still echoes in his head as he holds his own bullet wound. When the bullet flew, Izuku still remembers falling from that tree. At that moment, Izuku began to speak to himself about what was in his heart at that moment.
I failed to save an innocent life from the machine of man, and then I took a life with my bare hands.
A flashback to when Izuku took the bear's life fades in.
Oh, Kachan, I'm so sorry. If I had simply told you that I turned into a beast, you'd still be alive.
Two images of the fallen animal creatures pop in Izuku's mind, with the elk on the left and Kachan the bear on the right, laying on the ground as they drew their final breath, with Izuku in the center and his eyes open.
And if I was brave at that moment, you'd still be alive. Why does death take us? Is there really a sanctuary where all the pure-hearted ones gather and rejoice? Is there really a place where all the sinful burn in eternal flames? No one really knows for sure, but what I do know is that
He gestures to his bullet wound.
hurts like hell, And you know what? In some ways, I'm glad it happened. I was able to feel the same pain that the elk endured. Though this shot is non lethal, we still share the same pain. And it is because of that, Zuko clenches his fist in the real world. I will fight to my very last breath.
Back in reality, All For One stands right in front of Izuku, and All For One was about to say something. And without even a warning, Izuku then uppercutted All For One, causing him to fly backwards. Izuku stands up straight, and his wounds healed, and then he looks at All For One and says, "First off, he did tell me what you were capable of. He also told me that you talk a lot. He was right on the money with that one. 2. I'm not just some kid. I worked my whole life to be where I am now, and I've come so far, and I've learned so much. I've lived the best, but yet I've seen the worst. At one point, I wanted to become the number one hero, the symbol of peace, but ever since that day that your Nomu took my life, and I came back, I value and I treasure all life in this city, in the water, and in the desert. I failed to protect 3 lives." He holds up 3 fingers. "My mother's, an elk, a bear that was my friend. So, all that's left, that I have left to protect, are the ones that I've already spoken about. I must protect them from scum like you, and I refuse to fail this time." Izuku then powered up his strength and his fire, and he charged at All For One, and landing a successful blow on his mask, breaking it, revealing his face. Izuku was dumbfounded, for he looked at All For One's face for the first time, for he didn't have a face. His eyes were gone, and he didn't even have a nose. All For One saw his opportunity, and he striked a devastating blow on Izuku's chest, causing him to fly backwards and through a couple of buildings. Izuku then retreated to his feet and then ran back towards All For One. Only this time, he jumped as high as he could into the air and raised both of his hands up, conjuring a giant fireball above his head. And in a throwing motion, he then throws the ball down at All For One, and the impact of the flames created a mushroom cloud. When the smoke cleared, it revealed that All For One shielded it with his right arm. Everything that was in front of him was in ruins, but while everything around him, from behind him, was intact. Excuse me. His right sleeve was burned to ashes, revealing his arm, and a smile could be seen on his face. "Damn it," said Izuku. "That was one of my strongest attacks. I don't have much fire left within me. I know I gotta be wise on how I use it." All For One speaks. "Oh, come on, Izuku. Was that really your best attack? I must say I'm disappointed. Very disappointed. I almost don't want your quirk anymore. Now don't get me wrong, I still want to take it, but I'll make it even more powerful than you can ever do it." Izuku then said, "Let me ask you something. Is all that metal inside your body really worth it? Because it's certainly worth it to me." Izuku intensely stared at All For One. His eyes started glowing. "Ha! What are you talking about?" Suddenly, All For One started feeling heat around his head and down his nostrils. He started screaming in agony. He falls to his knees. The the metal around his head started heating up even higher, so high that at one point it started to glow red. Out of desperation, he ripped the metal tubes out from his nose and even took the rest of his helmet off. His nose was bleeding and his skin was blistered and red. Izuku ran up to him and he started clawing at All for One. Blood started spilling from each scratch wound that he would inflict on him, but then All for One would use his air cannon force to force Izuku to retreat. All for One was panting really fast. He wasn't really able to breathe without that equipment attached to him. Izuku could tell that he was getting desperate and knew he had to be careful. What the hell are you? Where did your power come from? Are you a spawn of hell? Are you the devil? Izuku stays silent. What are you? As the fire around them continues to burn, Izuku saw something flying through the air. And no, it wasn't a bird. What cleared the skies from up above emerged the number one hero with his iconic smile, All Might. He was about to land a sneak attack on All for One, but then All for One blocked it, causing a shockwave. Izuku was blown back, and when the smoke cleared, Izuku saw the two still trying to get the upper hand on each other. The two talked for a minute, doing the normal dialogue like in the anime itself. He would give the speech about how he should be ashamed of himself, that people in the city are just trying to live normal lives, and that kind of stuff. All for One punches All Might back, and Izuku stays back and wanted to regain some of his energy. This is good. All Might is very powerful, and him and All for One are arch nemesis. So he should be able to show me a few things so that I can gain the upper hand. Plus, my healing factor is starting to deplete. I used it too many times. Anyway, the two would start to fight for a while. All for One is trying to get inside Toshinori's head. They brawl and exchange blows to each other for a while, but then, at one point, All for One punched Toshinori in his scarring area, putting All Might into a lot of pain. Then, a familiar phenomenon happened to All Might. Izuku's eyes widen when he sees that All Might's body started to smoke with steam. Izuku says to himself, "No, the cameras are recording. The world can't see his true weakness, otherwise they'll lose hope." Izuku quickly ran over towards All Might, and All for One sees him coming. He then tries to shoot air cannons at Izuku, but Izuku dodges, relying on intuition and instinct. He reaches All Might and conjures a fire bubble around them to protect them from the cameras that were watching. People who were watching at home were scared. Is this going to be the end of All Might? Inside the bubble, All Might was in so much pain that he felt like he couldn't get up. "Young Midoriya, I'm sorry." Ugh. You are young Midoriya, right? Yeah? Don't worry, I could keep fighting. All Might could barely move from the pain. All for One started attacking the fire bubble with his air cannon. Knowing that time will soon run out, and that he doesn't have much of a choice, Izuku does something to assure All Might's survival. Werewolf Izuku then puts All Might in his lap, and he says, "All Might, please, don't think any less of me, but it's for your own good. I grant you the power of a 4-star general." Izuku then flexed his mouth out, and then he bit Toshinori, breaking the skin, leaving bite marks on his neck. The bite wound wouldn't be so deep, but he would bleed a little bit. All Might screamed in agony. Everyone who heard the scream from the TV, even All For One, wondered what was going on. Izuku then said, "Don't pass out if you want to survive. Look at the sky, and trust me, you'll survive. Just keep looking at the sky." Izuku then dropped the fire bubble, revealing what he had done to All Might. This shocked everyone who was watching. Even All For One started laughing and said, "Oh, what happened? Did you lose control again? This wouldn't have happened if you'd just given me your quirk." Izuku then clenches his fists and then jolted his jaws and charged at All For One. All For One would shoot air cannons at Izuku, but Izuku would dodge, luckily not getting hit by them. He would reach him and start trying to claw and scratch at him again, but All For One would dodge each attempt. And at one point, Izuku got too close to All For One, and he landed a shot on Izuku's chest. This hurt Izuku, but he kept going. But unfortunately, All For One managed to land another hit on Izuku's chest again. This time, the hole was bigger, and Izuku laid on the ground while blood began to spill from his body, creating a river. He falls. All For One approaches him, grabbing him by the neck. He would then start choking the poor young boy. Izuku then puts his fingers in between All For One's hands where they were choking him so that he could at least get a little bit of air. But Izuku thinks that it was all over, that All For One was about to steal his quirk, but he didn't. All For One was just trying to choke the life out of him. "I don't get it," said Izuku. "He has me right in his grasp, so why doesn't he just do it already?" "Oh, that's right. He's pissed, and he lets his emotions get the best of him and forget what he came here to do," which gives Izuku an idea. He started laughing. "What's so funny?" asked All For One. He keeps laughing. All For One gets annoyed. "Stop laughing." He doesn't stop. He laughs harder and louder. "Stop it!" Izuku starts wheezing, and All For One has had enough. And in a fit of rage, he then threw Izuku into another building. It took Izuku a second to regain his composure, but before he knew it, he saw All For One coming towards him again. Izuku then lets out a howl, calling as many clones as he could. They would run at All For One and started attacking him while Izuku recovered from his bullet wounds. For a while, things would look good for the clones. They would do some damage on All For One, but Izuku's healing factor was getting slower and slower. Every damage he took, he looked over at All Might and saw that he was still laying there. "Come on, All Might. You should have been up by now." Suddenly, a loud boom can be heard from outside the building, and a huge gush of wind ensues. Izuku looks, and he sees All For One walking towards him. It looks like here he had taken down the clones, and he had wiped the dust off of his shirt. Izuku wasn't done recovering yet, and All Might was still on the ground. Things are not looking good. All for One then breathes heavily out of irritation. He looks down at Izuku and he grabs him by the neck once again. With his other hand, he then aims 5 of his fingers at Izuku's stomach, and his fingers would then change. His fingers would then change color from black with having not white, red stripes. Suddenly, his fingers then cartoonishly stretched out and impaled Izuku, stabbing him in the torso. This put Izuku in a lot of pain. They All for One then said, "Let's empty the tank." He then used his forcible quirk activation. Large amounts of fire started emanating off of Izuku's body. Izuku screamed, and after a few seconds, he was drained of all of his fire. He felt exhausted and so weak, but in the process of All for One forcing his quirk to activate, he healed his quirk and did its thing to recover, and the stab wounds that All for One inflicted on him were now gone. All for One said, "Just die." He then started choking the hell out of Werewolf Izuku. His eyes nearly dropped out of his head, and All Might, who was still laying on the ground looking at the sky at a full moon, his irises started shaking. His muscles started to grow, and fur started to emanate from his body. His face then started stretching out, and his irises grow wide, covering a majority of his eyeballs. His throat then let out a growl, and he slowly started to stand up. Claws started appearing from his hands. He looks and sees All for One, and he walks towards him. While All for One was distracted, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in the back of his spine. He slowly turns around and sees a giant beast-like creature similar to Izuku looking directly at him with the intent to kill. He also had All Might's haircut, because that was All Might. Anyway, All Might had his claws deep inside of All for One's back that he had a handful of his spine in his fists. All for One then grunted in pain and he let go of Izuku, who took a deep inhale once he was able to breathe again. Werewolf All Might then threw All for One away. He then extended his hand out towards Izuku and helped him up, and both of them ran after All for One. Where he was getting up, still processing what had just happened. But his thinking was interrupted when he heard the familiar howls in the distance. He looks, and he saw 2 big, strong figures walking in the smoke, revealing Fire Fang, Izuku, and All Might. Together, they would run and start attacking All for One. They would claw and scratch at him and they would punch him. Blood began to spill everywhere. While they were fighting him, Izuku saw that a car was in flames, and he extended his hand out towards it, calling the fire to him. And with that, he was able to use his fire once again. Over at the city, Class 1A, along with other pro heroes that managed to get there to help the villains, to help them take the villains down. When they finished, all the teenagers reverted back to their normal forms and went and got themselves back in their clothing. They all heard the loud noises and they ran over to see what was going on. Bakugo and Shoto remembered that Izuku ran in that direction to fight their leader. As they all ran, they hoped that he was okay. When they arrived, they see that some buildings were demolished and collapsed and cars were on fire. They look and they see Izuku and what appears to be a giant werewolf, All Might. They look and see Izuku and Werewolf All Might fighting All for One. Some were taken off by how All Might looked, but as long as they were okay, that's all that mattered to them. The two werewolves would kick ass and take names, but then, at one point, All for One tried to fight back using his air cannon, and even doing that one trick where he would make his arm really big. But anyway, he would try and blast off at the two wolfmen, but they would dodge. But at one point, one of the bullets gave Izuku a minor flesh wound, and Uraraka and Yaoyorozu saw what had happened and wanted to jump in to help, but they were stopped by Bakugo and Shoto. Bakugo says, "Are you two crazy? You'll just get in the way. Just let them take care of this." They continue to watch, and Izuku and All Might are tag teaming All for One. And if I had a way of describing what that takedown looked like, I'd say it would look something like this. Anyway, All for One, knowing that he is losing, and as they come in for another attack, he sees Yaoyorozu in the distance, and with one fell swoop, he teleports her with that liquid transportation that he did in the show. All Might was delivering a Detroit Smash while holding Yaoyorozu as a shield, but then Izuku quickly dashed in, grabbed her, and All for One was forced to take the blow head on. Izuku then got a good distance away with Yaoyorozu, and he puts her down, saying, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine, thank you." "No problem. Quick, get everyone else away from here. Things are about to get ugly." "Okay, Izuku." She walks away, but she turns around and says, "Izuku." "Yeah?" "Please come back to me." "I will. Now go." She runs off, and Izuku goes back to the fight with All for One. All for One has had enough of this and says, "I will not stand this. I refuse to lose to two dogs on steroids. I am ending this." All for One then started to emit a sort of red light, and a sudden rush of wind ensues around him. He then said, "I am going to take this whole town and you two with me." Izuku and All Might get what is about to happen, and Izuku says, "I think he plans on turning himself into an atom bomb." "Yeah, I'm afraid so," said All Might. "We have to stop him." They would both charge in, but All for One would dodge them, like not even letting them get close enough. And after a few minutes of trying, and his light just getting brighter and brighter, Izuku then gets an idea. "Quick, use United States of Smash on him." "I can't," said All Might. "He keeps moving around, and if he keeps moving, I won't be able to land a perfect hit. With the United States of Smash, you only get one shot." Izuku looks back and forth from All Might to All for One, who is powering up. And then he says, "Okay then, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to run over there. I'm going to hold him down. And then you use it while I have him in place." "What?" No, no, we can't do that. We don't have a choice. You could get caught, but you'll get caught in the blast radius. You'll die, said All Might. A moment of silence goes by, and Izuku says, "It's what heroes do." "I'm still not doing it," said All Might. Izuku sighs and he says, "Yeah, I was afraid you'd say that. Then you've given me no choice." He looks into his eyes and he uses alpha male authority. With this, he can command anyone who is in his pack to obey him and do as he says. He says, "I'm going to hold down All for One, and you use United States of Smash. Do you got it?" All Might then said, "Understood, sir." Izuku takes a deep breath and he says, "Here I go." He then lunges himself at All for One. All for One would use air cannon, but Izuku would dodge. Man, there's a lot of air cannon and dodging going on in this thing. All for One says, "It's too late, Izuku Midoriya. You're not delaying the inevitable. I will take this city and everyone in it. You may even get to see your dearest mother in the afterlife once again." Him saying that pissed Izuku off, and suddenly all the flames that surrounded Izuku turned a bright blue. Izuku then battered his fist back, and while yelling, "You bastard!" Now, the sudden light of change distracted All for One enough for Izuku to land the hit. The hit would be so hot that the skin off of All for One's face started to melt off. Izuku then quickly got behind him and grabbed him, holding him in his place. "Ow! Do it!" said Izuku. All Might then charged up United States of Smash. All for One sees what is about to happen, and he says, "You fool! If this thing hits us, we're both dead!" Izuku takes in a deep breath and he says, "Not gonna survive. Neither will you." Izuku's life started flashing before his eyes. He thinks about his childhood friends, Bakugo and Shoto, and all the friends that he's made along the way. And he also thinks of his mother. "Mom, I'm sorry." Suddenly, Izuku felt ice on his chest, and All for One can feel ice forming from behind him, holding him in place. On his right, he hears an explosion. It's Bakugo using howitzer impact, and he hikes Izuku out of the way, while All for One was forced to stay in place, saving him. All for One stares at All Might as his fist connects to his face while yelling,
"Goodbye, All for One. United States of
Suddenly, a giant shockwave creates a sort of tornado that reaches so high into the sky and that created such a deep crater in the ground that building debris and all sorts of cars started flying into place. After a few seconds, the dust clears. Izuku shielded Bakugo with his body from the debris, and All Might stood there with his fist in the air. Everyone around Japan started cheering for All Might's victory. Izuku got up and said, "Thanks for saving me, Bakugo. Don't mention it." They ushered over to Werewolf All Might, and Izuku says, "All Might, are you alright?" He puts his fist down, and he turns his head to the boy with a smile on his snout. They take a sigh of relief, but then Werewolf All Might then punch Izuku on his face for making him do something that could have cost him his life. Izuku apologized for doing that and promised that he would never do it again. Soon, they were approached by Shoto. "Guys, are you okay?" "Yeah, we're fine." "That's great, but Izuku, we saw what happened to your mother on the news. I'm sorry." Izuku looked down to the ground in sadness, and then he hears, "Izuku!" They all looked over and see Inko running towards them with tears running down her face. Izuku's eyes widen and he says, "Mama!" He runs towards her and on all fours, and soon once he's closer, he runs on two legs again, and he hugs his mom while swinging around in a circle. A few seconds would pass, and Izuku says, "Wait a minute." He would smell her to make sure she is real. It matched. "Oh, thank God you're real." Izuku, said Izuku. He starts to tear up and says, I thought I'd lost you. How are you still here?" "It was Toga. She saved me from them." A flashback ensues. When Inko left the complex, she was captured by Dabi, and the manliest woman I've ever seen in an anime. That explains the thud noise. Dabi raised his blue-flamed hand towards Inko, and he said, "You scream, you die. You say anything, you die. You try and fight back, you die. Do you understand?" Inko nodded her head. They took her to the bar and strapped her down to a chair. While they were discussing their plan, Toga was assigned to keep watch on her. When it was just them, she spoke. If I can ask, how old are you?" "Why do you want to know?" "Because you look like you're my son, Jay. Because you look like you're my son's age. And I can tell you don't want to be here." She would go on saying things like, "You have your whole life ahead of you, and you can do better than involving yourself with these jerks." Toga looks to Inko, remembering that Izuku said something similar to that. She paces back and forth out of frustration. She stretches both of her arms out with a fist balled while pacing back and forth, fighting the urge to want to help her. She then repeatedly stomped her foot out of frustration, and she runs her fingers through her hair while saying, "Fine." She then reaches into her skirt pocket and pulls out a syringe. "You yell and I won't help you." She then stabs Inko in the arm with the needle and extracted blood from her. She then gets up and walks towards the door and leaves. She comes across Twice and says, "Hey, Twice, I need you to copy me. At least make two of me." Twice says, "Oh, and why do you need two of you?" Twice then said, "Oh, and why do you need two of yourselves?" And Miss... "Oh, and why do you need two of yourselves, Miss Schoolgirl?" Toka just stands there with a blank face and said, "Because." "Well, that sounds like a good reason to me. Okay, let me get your measurements." Soon, Toga walks back to the hallway outside of the room where Inko was and says, "Okay, you're going to disguise yourself as this woman and you're going to walk out with the League of Villains. I'm going to take away the real one and hide her and take her to safety." One
But why does she get to be Inko? I want to be Inko. No, I'm gonna be Inko. She already assigned me. No, me. No, me. Me.
Will you both just shut up and do it?
Okay, fine. Lucky.
The real Toga gives the copy Toga a vial of Inko's blood and ingests it, taking her shape and clothing magically, like her quirk can. They enter the room with the real Inko. She was surprised that there was two Togas and a woman that looked just like her. Toga then gets in her face and says, "Listen, I'm going to get you out of here, so don't give me any trouble." She takes off the restraints, and on the Toga clone, disguised as Inko, she then sits down in the chair and straps her back down. She takes Inko out of the room and says to the other Toga that was still looking like ordinary Toga, "Okay, you're up." She walks away, and Clone Toga was like,
Okay, good luck. While she
waved her hand. She walks into the room with the cloned Toga dressed up like Inko, and the real Toga and Inko leave the bar without being seen. When the time came for the League to attack, she took Inko to a place where there were more people with a television. I'm gonna say she went to like some sort of food restaurant. "Stay nearby," said Toga. "Surprisingly, this man has more goons around here than you think." On the TV, the news was showing Izuku being surrounded by villains. Toga watches along to the part where Shigaraki killed the clone and revealed itself to be a Toga clone. Toga says, "Well, I guess the cat's out of the bag now." Inko continues to watch in horror as the camera gets closer to as the camera zooms in on Izuku's face. He was sad and he was crying. It hurt her to see her son like this. She then watched him changed into a werewolf and start murdering people. She gasps, not being able to stomach the fact that her son is killing villains.
Yeah, she may understand that Izuku thinks that she's dead, but still, it's too much for her to stomach.
She looks to Toga and says, "We need to go to him." "Are you crazy? God, we got away from them. And you want to go back?" "No, it's just my son. He needs to know that I'm okay." "Your son is surrounded by 1,000 bad guys. Well, a few hundred men, the ones he killed right now. He needs this if he's going to survive. So just sit down and hope for him." They continue to watch as Izuku creates a heat bubble that turned the villain into ashes, and even watched him chase a man into an alley and blow fire down it, burning him. She couldn't sit there any longer. She felt like horrible. She felt like a horrible person for not being there for her son when he is in distress. And then it got to the point where she saw the villains chain Izuku down and water him back to normal. and watched them beat him into submission more. When she saw the boss approach him, she lost it. She got up and ran out the building. "Hey, where are you going?" said Toga. She chased after her, barely able to catch her until she grabbed her by the back of her sweater, stopping her. "What are you doing? Are you trying to get your son killed?" Inko tried. Inko turned around with tears running down her face. "He's my son. I can't let him be alone." Toga thinks for a second and she says, "Fine, but stay near me at all times." They run downtown to the conflict. When they get there, they see Izuku's classmates rescuing him. They stay in the shadows and watch closely. "Stay out of sight," said Toga. She had a knife drawn just in case they were about to get run up on. They watched as Izuku ran off to fight All For One. They quickly followed him and watched him, but then they were spotted by a villain. "Hey, you're that Toga girl, and you have the real mom. Why, I oughta..." Before he could finish that sentence, Toga kicked the man in the head and was about to bring her knife up to stab him, but then she was stopped by Inko. "Toga, please, no." She looks back at Inko and turns the knife around and hits the man in the head with the butt of the knife. She sighed and said, "Come on." Soon they find Izuku and watch. "All For One, I will take you down," said Izuku. Inko and Toga watched for All For One shoot Izuku. Inko gasps and cries, nearly whimpers. Toga covers her mouth to stop her. They continue to watch as Izuku uppercuts All For One, and they would fight. They would watch for a while until All Might shows up. And Toga knows that All Might and All For One would have made hell, so she dragged Inko out of there, and obviously she was right. Getting as further away as possible, she watched. They were still able to make out what was going on. All Might and All For One started fighting, while Izuku catches his breath. They also saw Izuku form a fire bubble around him and All Might, and reveal that Izuku actually hurt All Might. Both of them were frozen with bewilderment, but during the fight, they saw All Might change and assist Izuku. They watched him tag teaming the villain, and happy to see that her son was winning, but then All For One threatened to use his atom bomb technique as she sees her son holding All Might. As she sees her son holding All For One and All Might charging up his United States of Smash, she had a feeling that that was not going to only hurt All For One, but also her son. She yelled out loud, "No!" But then Bakugo came in and saved Izuku, and so did Shoto. Izuku and All For One took the attack. All For One took the attack by himself and was critically injured. When the smoke cleared, she saw her son was okay, and the bad guy was down. After processing all of it, Toga then said, "Okay, fine. Now you can go." She gets up and she walks away. "Wait, Toga, come with us. I'm sure we can get the police on your side." There's no hope for me. There's no hope for me, ma'am. Once a villain, always a villain. But not you, said Inko. Toga felt something in her chest, a sort of touchy feeling that made her want to drop tears, but she didn't. Instead, she said, "You take care, Miss Midoriya." She walks off, and the flashback ends. Inko then wipes away her tears and said, "I'm so glad you're okay, son." The two share a hug, but their moment was interrupted when All For One, who was still alive, started laughing. They all look at him in a sense of caution. Izuku said, "Mom, stay back." Over at the group, Bakugo, Shoto, Werewolf All Might, and Werewolf Izuku grouped around the villain, and All For One said, "Great job, Izuku. You really got me good. But this is far from over. My successor, Shigaraki, is still out there, and he's got plans for you and your friends. So if I were you, I'd always be looking over my shoulder and be careful who I trust, because that's the life of a superhero, right?" He lifts up his head and he senses Inko nearby. He then raises his right hand towards her and he says, "And Miss Midoriya, you've raised a fine boy. It's just too bad that he has so much blood on his hands. What will society think of him now?" All For One then smiled, and all of a sudden Izuku's senses went off, warning him of danger. All For One's fingers then turned black with the pattern striped of red, and they stretched cartoonishly towards Inko. Izuku saw what was about to happen, and he takes action. He ran over towards his mother and jumps in front of her, taking the daggers for her. The daggers would pierce through his back of his torso. Two of the blades would pierce both of his lungs, and then two of the blades would pierce his stomach area, and then the final one would pierce right through his heart. Inko had to watch as her son's blood started oozing out onto her face and then to the ground. Izuku falls to the ground, rapidly losing blood. All Might then flinched back to All For One, who was laughing. He then removed the blades from Izuku's body, and then All Might made a fist, and All For One said something before he did. "I wouldn't do that. I..." All Might didn't listen. He landed the final blow on the mob boss, killing him. Over at Izuku, Inko was screaming to the sky, "No! No, 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 son! Son, look at me. Don't fall asleep. Dear God, no!" Izuku would be shocked and choking on his own blood. He tried to control his breathing, but due to his lungs being in the state that they were, all he could do was cough and gag his own blood. Bakugo and Shoto ran over to Izuku's side in shock of what happened. Shoto says, "Hold on, I'm gonna cauterize your wounds." Shoto would apply fire onto Izuku's stab wounds. Izuku would grunt for having to be rolled around. Izuku felt something like this before. He felt tired and his life essence was fleeing from his mortal coil. He knew that it was coming, his time. And so he, even though he had holes in his lungs, he still managed to put words together. eyes. Bakugo responded, saying, "Yeah, we're here." Izuku then said, "You guys were my best friends I've ever had. Live." He had to cut his words short. Live long. Live long. Save lives. Protect the innocent. Mom, sweetie, please just don't talk. Save your strength. Be strong. Look forward, never back. I love you. Son, no, no. Inko would then bring Izuku's head in tighter as her tears would drip on Izuku's face. Izuku's voice would get weaker and weaker with every passing second. Um, I, I, yes, what is it, young Midoriya? I, don't worry. This will be gone in a minute. He raises a hand to All Might's chest, gesturing that his werewolf form will soon fade. Keep smiling. Keep fighting. Keep moving on. Keep being awesome. All Might then said, "No, no, 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 no. There must be something. We gotta do something. Somebody's losing a lot of blood. Wait, what about your healing factor? Shouldn't it kick in by now?" Izuku grudgingly says, "I used it too many times. This is too severe for me to recover from. I'm feeling sleepy." Bakugo grabs Izuku by his snout and he says, "Don't fall asleep. Don't, don't, don't die on me. We promised that we would protect the world together. We, you can't, you can't leave us. Please don't go. Stay awake." Shoto takes Izuku by the hand and he rubs his hand against his face while tears run down his face. Everyone who was watching saw what had happened. Paramedics and pro heroes also raced to Izuku to save his life, but unfortunately, Izuku doesn't have much time left. All Might thinks for a second, and he gets an idea. He kneels down next to Izuku and he says, "I was saving this for young Mirio, but this is a do or die situation." He plucks a hair from his head and he says, "Young Midoriya, I need you to eat this." He holds the strand of hair to Izuku's face. Izuku, Izuku's breathing was getting slower, and he says, "No." "But Miss Midoriya, please, you have to convince him to eat this hair. He won't make it if you don't." Inko then looks down to her son and she says, "Sweetie, please just eat the hair. He's trying to save you." And with that, in short words, Izuku opens his mouth and All Might feeds him the hair. He had a little trouble swallowing it, but he manages. But then, Izuku started to shrink down back to his human form. As the smaller he was getting, his eyes would slowly close, and his breathing would get slower, and then eventually stop. When he was normal, he then tilted his head to the side as he drew his last breath. Inko would tightly embraced the body of her now deceased son, and she would break out into tears. Bakugo and Shoto and everyone who knew who Izuku was started crying for the loss of their friend. All Might, who was free from the werewolfism, felt ashamed of himself that he failed to save the life of his student, his protege, his friend. We then transition to the afterlife. It's dark. It's quiet. Yeah, I remember this place, said Izuku. Yep, said the wolf. We're both dead again. You think there's a chance that the Phoenix is going to come and help us again? Said Izuku. I don't know. I don't see it, said the wolf. Yeah, well, maybe there's a chance he's not coming. Perhaps we should just wait here and wait for the gates of heaven to show us the path, and hopefully we will be granted into the sanctuary of heaven. Izuku, I feel weird, like something's missing. I don't know what it is. Yeah, I kind of feel weird too, like something's been drained from me. Maybe it's just some sort of after effect of death. Izuku thinks and then he sighs. You know, I'm gonna miss them. Bakugo and Shoto, those were my brothers. And All Might was a great teacher. Ida, he and everyone else is finally free. They have their lives back. And Mom, I can't imagine what she's going through right now. She must be heartbroken. The wolf then said, I'm sure she would have died for you too. Yeah, I know. Suddenly, the familiar sounds of flapping wings can be heard in the distance. They both turn around and to see the phoenix actually flying in. A smile comes across Izuku's face, but when the phoenix came in for landing, for some reason, land didn't grow around them. There was no trees, there was no mountains, there was no grass. It was just the phoenix just sitting on what appears to be an invisible tree or something. Hey, Izuku, said the phoenix. Hey, said Izuku. I don't suppose you're here to help me, are you? I'm sorry, but I can't. Oh, I see. But I am here to offer you and your wolfy friend here a deal. What would that be? Asked Izuku. As you know, Izuku, I have been around for a very, very long time. I have lived millions of lives. And sometimes nowadays I just wish that I could just lay down and rest in peace. But my work will never be done. At least I'm hoping today I can pass it on to someone I trust. Someone with a heart bigger than anyone else on earth. Someone like you, Izuku. I want to offer you my powers. The Phoenix then enlists the powers and abilities that he has. The power of immortality, matter manipulation, telepathy, telekinesis, life force manipulation, and cosmic awareness with this one word that I can't pronounce. Presensis? Presensis? I think that's what it says. I don't know, look on the screen. All that power could be yours. The downside is the people who do not have the blood of Zeus flowing through their veins will not be able to see you. You will be a phantom to everyone on Earth, but you can still protect it. You could save more than one person at a time. And you can even protect the Earth from extraterrestrial threats. Think of it as a sort of land that is yours, and you want to make sure that other things stay out of it. Think of it like,
Huh? What are you doing in my swamp?
anyway, though yes, you may be able to send subliminal messages to others who need your guidance, but you can do more. Take my power and become Lopus Ignis, the Firewolf. Do you accept? Izuku could not believe what he was being told, that he was going to be able to receive the powers of the Phoenix Force. He was about to say something, but then a light started emanating around the room. It was a sort of neon light show of red and yellow and pink. They looked and they saw 7 figures that let off this light. One of the figures spoke. "Hey, kid. Who are you?" asked Izuku. The one shadowy figure then revealed herself. It was a woman with black hair. She was wearing very thick yellow gloves, and she had a cape on, and she had a mole just on the bottom right side of her face. You can call me Nana Shimura. I'm the 7th wielder of One for All. The same quirk you possess. I've come to take you home. Wait, all for one? Wait, one for all? Yes, that's right. One for all. The same quirk that All Might wield, he gave it to you to save your life. Yes, you're dead, but we're here to bring you back home. On my case, actually, people will be able to see you. You'll be able to see your family and friends again. I mean, I'll be honest, it won't beat the Phoenix's power, but I'd pick my option over not having anyone being able to see me. You just have to come with me. She extended her hand out. Izuku is stuck between a rock and a hard place. He has two choices. To he has two choices to make. To either take the Phoenix Force and become the protector of the Earth, or go back home with All Might's power and save the life of one person at a time. Izuku looks back and forth between the Phoenix and Nana. He then looks to his wolf and he nods his head. Izuku then walks over to the Phoenix and says, "I'm sorry, Phoenix, but if I'm gonna be a great hero one day, a true hero, I'm going to need to continue in the same spot that I worked so hard to get to, and keep climbing up." "Very well, Izuku," said the Phoenix, "but if I may give you a few words before you go. May your heart remain pure, and your will lives on, a life where you will live in peace and pass it to others. That is what I hope for you." Izuku smiles and he walks over to Nana and the other shadowy figures. "We're ready," said Izuku. "Good. Let's go home," said Nana. She reaches her hand out, and Izuku shakes her hand, and then the screen then fades to a blinding white light. In the real world, everyone was in the same place where Izuku died. Inko held her deceased son in her arms, while Bakugo and Shoto and All Might were comforting her. Suddenly, Izuku's body started emitting a flashy light of red and yellow and pink. They all look and see, wondering what is going on. What is this light? The light then slowly faded away. They leaned in closer towards Izuku. We get a close look up at Izuku's face. He's still for a second, and then he jolts upwards while gasping for air. He breathes rapidly. "Oh my god, Izuku, you're back," said Inko. Inko brings her son in for a tight hug. Bakugo and Shoto, along with All Might, are relieved that Izuku is back to life. Inko says, "It's gonna be okay, son. We're gonna get you a medic." Son? Izuku. She shakes Izuku, but Izuku's eyes were fixed at the sky, for what lied there was a full moon. Izuku already started changing. Bakugo quickly grabbed Inko and pulled her away from Izuku. No! Wait, what are you doing? Said Inko. Stay back! He might be dangerous, said Bakugo. FYI, Izuku doesn't have entire control of the beast. Right now, he's just hurting from the stab wounds, and his survival instincts are telling him to run. He thinks that if he stays here, he'll get hurt more, so therefore, he has no choice but to retreat. And so, that's what he does. He runs away. Wait, Izuku! Where are you going? Said Inko. She tried to follow him, but All Might stopped her, saying, No, let him run. He needs to do this. Other bro heroes showed up, trying to stop Izuku, but All Might yelled at them, No, let him go! Let him go! They all stopped, and Werewolf Izuku began to leap through buildings to buildings like he would do on trees, ricocheting himself from left to right. A helicopter began to follow him, recording his movements. Yaoyorozu and Uraraka and everyone who thought Izuku was dead looked up and saw that he was up and moving again. Their faces then turned from sad to happy, and Uraraka and Yaoyorozu would jump into the air while yelling, Run, Izuku, run! The rest of their classmates would cheer, and the crowd would join them. As the helicopter continued to keep its light on Izuku, he did one final leap, using 100% of One For All that he was not aware of. Within a flash, he then leaped high into the sky and then disappeared into the dark. And in doing so, he left a deep crater on the ground. Inko, Bakugo, Shoto, and All Might were still surprised that Izuku came back to life for the, second time in a row? Inko continues to stare in the direction where Izuku went, but she felt a hand on her shoulder. She looked up and saw Bakugo. Hey, it's gonna be okay. He'll be back. She then continued to look in the direction as the screen fades to black. Oh, and before I forget, just about a few hours prior, the fire department and water heroes have been found in an abandoned warehouse. They were a bit beat up, but they were still alive. 3 weeks would pass, and Izuku did not return home. So they had a search party looking for him for a missing wolf boy. Even Class 1A and Class 1B assisted. After a few days of searching, they were about to give up on looking for him, but Bakugo and Shoto found him in the woods, in a cave. He was in a meditative position, and he had what appeared to be mint leaves wrapped around his right arm. Bakugo called his name, but he doesn't respond. Shoto shakes him. Izuku, are you alright? Izuku slowly opens up his eyes and he sees them, but they kind of frightened him a bit, and he jumps up. Izuku breathes heavily and he says, Oh, it's just you guys. Good to see you. Glad you're okay. Bakugo says, Izuku, where have you been? Your mother's worried about you. Izuku sighs and says, Well, there's something wrong with me, and I don't know if I can face her right now. Shoto then says, Why? What's wrong? And what happened to your arm? Izuku then got up and turned his back on them, saying, It's complicated, and I'm not entirely sure why, but I don't know how I broke my arm, to be honest. but I don't know about this other situation that caused it. It just, it's just, guys, Izuku stops in mid-sentence, for it hurt him too much to even speak about. Izuku, listen. Whatever it is, we can face it together. Even if it's bigger than what we anticipated. We faced worse. What makes this so different? What makes this so difficult? Izuku starts tearing up, and he takes in a deep inhale and he says, "Guys, I lost my firepower." Bakugo and Shoto were surprised by that. Bakugo says, "What? How did you lose your firepower?" I don't know. All for One drove me into town to trap me so that he could steal my quirk, but at the last moment, I still had my firepower when he died. So I I don't know. And I don't know what could have caused it. I still have my wolf quirk though. That's good, but I don't feel whole. Izuku sits back down on the ground. I thought if I stay here, I'll be able to find it again, just like I did my wolf side. But I found nothing. I I can't feel it anymore. The fire that burns inside me, it's just gone. So how can I be Fire Fang without my fire? How can I be a hero without my fire? After a few seconds, Bakugo says, "Well, we'll find a way. I'm not entirely sure how, but for now, we need to get you back home so we can get you help." Bakugo extends his hands out, and Izuku takes Bakugo's hand and he gets up. They report back to everyone that they have found him, and they gathered. They greeted Izuku, happy that he's alright, and Yaoyorozu and Uraraka being the most happy that he's okay. They run up to him and they hug him, and then eventually they get put on a bus while Izuku is put in an ambulance for his broken arm. And I forgot to mention this, Izuku was wearing a loincloth made out of leaves and stuff. Inko was given the news that her son was found and that he was at the hospital. But as she was getting there, she had a bit of trouble for the news reporters, interviewers, and people who wanted to know about the whereabouts and condition of her son were slowing her down. She arrives at the hospital, but even the reporters followed her there, hoping to get a word with Izuku. She entered the room and sees her son in a hospital bed, asleep, and his arms were wrapped in bandages. She walks up to the side of his bed and she sits down next to him. Tears began to fill her eyes, and then she grabbed Izuku by his good hand. "I'm sorry, son. I'm, I'm so sorry." While she was looking down, she heard, "What are you sorry for?" She looked up and sees Izuku awake. More tears filled her eyes. She jumped up and hugged her son. Izuku turns. Izuku returns the hug. "Why are you crying, Mom?" I was I was so worried about you, son. I I saw you get stabbed and that image is burned into my head. I don't want you to sacrifice yourself for me like that again. I'm the one who should have been stabbed that night." "Mom, don't say that. If I wasn't the one who was stabbed, you wouldn't be here." "I failed you as a mother," said Inko. She points her head downwards and she says, "I'm sorry, son. I'm sorry that I'm so weak." Inko would sob, and then She would feel a hand on the top of her head, and Izuku would say, Mom, it's a hero's job to assure the safetyness of those who cannot protect themselves. I knew exactly what I was signing up for when I wanted to become a hero. I honestly wanted to be a hero like All Might, Mom, but my real hero was you. Now, I could go on talking about that old cliche stuff that you always told me that everything would be okay as a kid when things would look bad, and you would always assure that things would be okay. I'm not ashamed for what I did, Mom. And as a hero, I would do it again. So please stop crying. After a minute, she would stop crying, and Izuku would think that now would be the best time to tell her. Mom, I'm going to tell you something, but please don't be mad at yourself when I tell you. What is it? Mom, Mom, I lost my firepower. Inko obviously was upset by that. Are, are you sure? Yes. I thought it was just my imagination at first, but it's true. I don't know how, but it's gone. My fire wolf is, I mean, my wolf side is still intact, but my fire is gone. Inko cries in the palm of her hands, and Izuku says, Mom, it's not your fault. And, on the bright side, I can somewhat control the werewolf. I just have to learn to keep my temper under control. Inko then explodes with more tears. She then runs out of her son's bedroom while yelling, "I'm so sorry. My mom, please." With his one good hand, Izuku face palms his own face with regret, for he only made the situation with his mom worse. After a few minutes, he got two visitors, All Might and Endeavor. "Hello there, young Midoriya," said All Might. "Midoriya, how are you doing?" asked Endeavor. Izuku speaks in a surprised voice. "All Might, Sensei, um, it's good to see you." All Might then took a seat next to Izuku and said, "Not as glad as I am to see you alive and well. I thought we lost you back there for a minute." Yeah. My time in the other world, if you may, 7 other figures came in there and got me, and they said, I have your power now." "That's right," said Toshinori. "I'll explain that to you later, but first, I have to tell you something, young Midoriya." All Might then bows down and he says, "I'm sorry." "You're sorry? What are you sorry for?" "I'm the reason that your fire quirk is gone." "What? What do you mean?" 3 weeks ago, when we fought All for One, when he stabbed you with all 5 of his finger blades, he stole your quirk. And as I delivered the final blow, he even warned me. I wouldn't do that. And then he died, taking your fire quirk with him. And with that, I'm sorry. He tried to warn me. He wanted to say I wouldn't do that. I have his quirk. That's what he wanted to say. I'm so sorry, young Midoriya." Izuku thinks for a second and then he sighs. It's okay. I may have lost one thing, but I've gained something else. Izuku looks down to his hands and reflects on the time he used his fire quirk. He was going to miss it. But then he felt a hand on his shoulder. He looks up and he sees Endeavor, who was comforting him. Hey, it's gonna be alright. Lend me your hand. Izuku then places his good hand in the palm of Endeavor. Endeavor then set Izuku's hand ablaze, but only his hand. Izuku's eyes widen as he slowly lifts up his hand from Endeavor's palm. The flames continue without burning Izuku's skin. Endeavor says, remember what it's like to have this power. When you owned it, when you controlled it. When the doctor said that it was unstable and that it would be impossible to control. You defied those odds, Izuku. You've even taught me that nothing is impossible. When you thought about quitting, you always put yourself back up and you always tried again and you succeeded. So don't lose hope, Izuku. I promise you, someday, somehow, we will find a way to restore your fire to you. The flames on Izuku's hand then began to lift. When it did, Izuku bursted into tears from Endeavor's wisdom. It's gonna be okay, said Endeavor. And All Might. We slowly then moved out from the window of the hospital and outside, still hearing Izuku's cries. As they slowly fade away, he then said, I'll hold on to hope, as the screen fades to black. And that is the end of part 13 of What If Deku Was a Fire Wolf. Oh man, this is crazy. Will Izuku ever get his firepower back? How is he going to cope with just using his werewolf side? This is crazy. Anyway, I hope everyone enjoyed this What If, and if you would like the background of this where the wolf is walking, there's a link in the description that'll take you to the store so you can have it for your own device. And what else do I say? Right. If you made it to the end of this video, consider yourselves #blessed, and I hope everyone has a nice day. Goodbye.